Welcome to payroll lesson number 17 on doing a test pay run. I'm currently in the payroll center screen and we're going to do a test pay run. The reason we do a test pay run is so that we can compare with your current system and catch any setup problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into the pay run button to open up the pay run window. And the pay run window is divided into several tabs, as you can see here, that complete a complete payroll process. Now let's talk about pay runs for a moment. Because Cobra allows you to enter information directly to the jobs through payroll, you could possibly have more than one active pay run going on at any given time, so that you can enter time cards daily to payroll and to jobs, accounting for the lapse in the date between the end of the check run period and the actual check date. So it's possible to have more than one active pay run going on at a time. But let's talk about this pay run for our test purposes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the New Run button, which brings Cobra up to the run date, which is usually the current date. Now when I hit enter, I'm brought to the start date and the end date, which represent the actual pay dates. Okay, so what you want to do is make sure that you have the beginning pay date and the ending of the pay date in here, and then when you hit enter, you're brought to the check date, which represents the date of the check. Now remember that the check date represents the accounting date and the date that you actually accrue the liabilities for the pay run. So things like your checkbook and general ledger will not recognize the accounting for this pay run until you hit the actual check date for that run. Now when I hit enter, I'm brought to the starting check number. Now keep in mind that as you begin using the program, the starting check number will keep up with you. So you shouldn't have to change that. As I hit enter, I'm brought down to the cash account. I can use the default one, or I can select from a different cash account in here by selecting it from the drop down. But I'm just pressing enter here. If we're also doing direct deposit on this pay run, you can put in a name for the direct deposit file that Cobra will create in your Cobra directory. And notice that we have an example of a direct deposit file name, starting with PR for payroll and then literally the check date of the pay run, and then ending with .txt, because all NACHA import files must use this naming convention. So if we were going to put one in for this one, I would put in PR 11062005.txt. When I hit enter, I'm brought down to the pay run notes. So if you wanted to, for this particular pay run, you could put in notes about it. Now keep in mind, we're not going to keep this pay run, we're not going to save it permanently, but for any pay run you could have notes about it. This is a bonus pay run or whatever, so you may not always use that, but it is nice. When I hit enter, I'm brought down to the next line. So what I'm going to do is pick up my mouse and click on the Save Run button. And look at that. It says the check date falls on a weekend. Are you sure you want to continue? And you can say yes or no depending on your own needs, and maybe change that check date. But as the pay run is saved, it assigns the pay run an ID number, which will be on all the reports related to this pay run. And you'll see the run ID all over the place. But it also at the right has pre-set up the payroll with information it needs to do certain calculations. So it knows which quarter of the year this pay run goes to, which month of the week, or week of the month I should say, and which week of the year also. So it uses those to calculate deductions and all sorts of things based on this information. Now that's all you have to do to set up a pay run. Okay, so if you've set up more than one pay run, you can find all your pay runs by clicking into the blue lookup button to see all of your active pay runs. Now, if you only have one active pay run right now, that's the one that will be displayed for you at this time. Now let's go into the Timecard Entry screen and let's start entering some hours. Now before I do that, I want to talk about a test pay run, because here we're not going to be concerned about updating job cost. So I want to make sure that you do not have a checkbox in this, a check mark in this checkbox, because as you know, the payroll does link directly to the job cost side of things, but we're not concerned about updating job cost. We're only concerned about doing a test pay run. So we're only going to be working with the left side of the screen. The right side of the screen we'll be using later when we actually have the Workers and Job Master Pro attached to the payroll for job costing. Now to enter pay run hours, what we do is we click on a worker and it's brought down to the bottom part of the screen here, as you can see. Now what we need to do is enter the hours for the period that we're going to be paying them or emulating on the payroll side. So the work date represents the hours or the date range between the beginning of the pay run and the end of the pay run. So Cobra will not let you enter hours outside of this date range. And so if you get a message that you're trying to enter hours outside of the date range, you'll know that that's what we're talking about here. So when I enter the work date and I hit enter, I'm brought down to the pay rate. Now, when you click open the pay rate drop down, you'll see all the pay rates attached to this particular worker. Now, the object here isn't to do anything more than enter the total number of hours for any individual pay run. So what I would do is select the pay rate, enter the total number of hours for the pay run that we're trying to emulate. And then as I hit enter, I'm brought down to the type of hours: straight time, overtime, or double time. So depending on what you select in this little drop down, the important thing is you hit enter so that it goes out and finds the right rate for those hours. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit enter and say save those hours. So right away we should see the total number of hours, the wage, and the earnings. So right away we should be able to compare these earnings with his past pay period, so that we know right from the get-go we're starting out with the right number. So you can accomplish this by entering one or more records, depending on if you had different rates of pay during that pay period or whatever. So it doesn't matter if you enter one record or you enter 2 or 3 records, if you had different rates of pay or using different pay rates. But the idea is to have the total number of hours and the total earnings right from the start equaling what he had on the test run that we're trying to emulate. Then we begin doing this for each of our workers. We enter double click on the employee, we select the pay rate for that employee in the pay rate drop down, the total number of hours, straight time, hours, overtime, double time, and you hit enter. Now keep in mind that if you had overtime and you want those recorded separately, you have to do a separate entry for that. So let's do that. Let's say you had 2 hours of overtime, so I'm going to select overtime type of hours here. And I can do that either by opening up this drop down and clicking enter on it, or I can use my arrows if I'm a keyboard person. Just use my arrows. Notice that as I use my arrows, the type of hours is changing. So either way, but once you have the type of hours selected, you press enter so it knows to go grab the right wage for the type of hours, and you post those through. So always use these as a guideline for knowing and comparing right off the bat. Does he has the right number of hours, type of hours, and the total number of earnings compared to the payroll we're emulating. So we'll just continue this for a few more workers so that we can get through this and actually run the pay run. Excellent. Now once the time card's hours are entered, what we can do is go into the Calculate tab. Notice I'm just going right down the tabs here, and I can click my Calculate button. And what that will do is calculate the payroll for all the people that had time cards, and that's why there are only 3 workers showing up here, because they are the only ones who had time card hours during the pay period. But what I can do is double click on each worker, and then in each of these tabs I can see the calculated payroll information. So here you can see the total taxes for each of your taxes. And keep in mind that COBRA's tax calculations are extremely accurate. Now there are some states that round the taxes. COBRA does all of that as well. But there are some payroll programs that round everything regardless of whether the state requires the numbers to be rounded. So in checking these, you can compare with your previous pay run. And in checking these, I always say that if you're within $1 compared to your other system, that you're in good shape here. But if you notice something is way out of whack, you know that we have to handle it on the setup side. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So in these tabs, this is where you can check all of that information. Deductions, benefits, any time off, etc. Now you could, if you wanted to, especially if you're doing your first kind of catch-up pay run, and a catch-up pay run is to bring your payroll system up to date for the year. So if you're entering, say, a quarterly pay run, these numbers are going to be inaccurate, and you can double-click on each record and edit them to what they should have been up to that point anyway. So if you're doing catch-up pay runs, which I recommend to do quarter by quarter, you can edit the results of these, because these are being calculated based on their normal weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly pay. But let's go on to checks here. Show you a little bit about this, because this is really cool. When you go into the checks tab, you can say create checks, and then it will create checks for everybody in that pay run, and it numbers those checks, etc. But right from the get-go, if you notice there's something wrong, the net pay isn't right or something, you can double-click into any of these records and you can get a closer look at the actual record. So this is actually what the check would look like if we were to print it out right now. But we don't have to, and that's the nice thing. Payroll is very, very forgiving. So if we notice, oh gosh, we forgot to enter those overtime hours for this guy, or the taxes aren't right, or the SARSAP isn't calculating right, these are all setup issues that we're catching. Now it's easy to look at it check by check, but what I usually recommend when I exit out of here is to print the pay run report, because that is your hard copy for the pay run. All right, and it gives you everything that we need to problem solve this pay run. And so you always want to print out your pay run report. And sometimes if you're not sure of how to problem solve this, you can print it out and write in the areas that you're concerned about, and you can fax it into us and we can help you problem solve this. So it's also a great problem solving tool. But for example, if you noticed on one of these checks that maybe we forgot to enter some hours, or the rate wasn't right or something, we need to make corrections, okay? What we can do when I exit out of here is go back to the Timecard Entry. We can edit anything in here. Maybe we forgot some hours or something like that. Maybe I needed to record it at 41 hours of straight time. Doesn't matter. Oh, what I needed to do first, though, thank you, is actually reset my pay run. Because to enter new time cards, we need to reset the calculated pay run, which we do in the main pay run tab right here. So we can reset this pay run as many times as we need to. So I forgot to do that, and it reminded me to do that, so that's good. So let's say for this guy, we actually wanted to enter or edit the existing hours record. I can do that by double clicking on it. It brings it down here. Maybe it should have been, as I was trying to do before, 41 hours. There we go. So again, it updates our units. We could enter more time card records, etc. So I go back to calculate, and I can click my calculate button, and it does another calculate on the pay run, and again you can see the results of the calculations in here. I can go back to checks, say create checks again, and I can reevaluate things at this point, even print a new pay run report. Okay, so that's really where we want to get to at this point. We can always go back and calculate, enter more hours, reset the pay run. This current step basically is keeping track of where we are in the process of a pay run. So if we are in the wrong step and you wanted to re-enter timecard entry hours or whatever, you can always go back and reset this. Resetting the pay run does not take the timecard hours out. So obviously you don't need to re-enter those again, but you can edit them, you can add to them, etc. Very forgiving. So along the way, once we see that our pay run report is correct by going through this process, we might need to exit out of the pay run altogether, maybe take a look at a deduction, how it's set up. Is it calculating correctly? Should it be fixed amounts or should it be calculating based on rates? All those things can be preset and checked and rechecked. Come back into the pay run, recalculate the pay run based on changes. Yep, there again, won't let me recalculate because I have to reset my pay run. Good practice to get into. Now I can recalculate it. So you can always see all the results of everything very visually on screen. Don't have to print a lot of stuff out, which is nice. Create your checks. Now at this point, after you've printed your pay run report, in real life, you could take the next step of printing your checks by clicking this button. But even after you finished a pay run, if you notice that one check was wrong, we can restore that pay run, which we'll talk about later. We can make corrections to it and just print one individual's check. So we don't have to print all the checks each time you run the pay run if you're just making a correction to a check, and that's pretty cool. Now if I go into the finish pay run, what this will do is allow us to complete the pay run. So when I say post the pay run, which is the first button, what that does is creates the accounting records for the pay run, and I can print them or I can preview them, and they're available in both a summary and a detail format. So if we look at the summary format first, what this shows you is account by account, everything that affected this payroll. So you can see if things are going to the wrong account, things of that nature right here too, because even at this point, if you notice, oh my gosh, I've got my Minnesota State unemployment going to the wrong account, you can make those corrections in the setup. So that's pretty cool. I'll exit this and then I'll do the detail one too, because the detail shows us employee by employee if I just hit enter here. Otherwise I could put the employee's ID in there and limit it to a single employee. But I'm just going to press enter so I can view the entire pay run employee by employee. So even here, if we notice at this point that something's askew, something's not going to the right account, whatever, we can make those corrections at this point. And I think it's very important when you're first starting out to look at the detail one just to catch any problems. It may not be something you're going to use all the time, but even if you want to view it on screen, I think it's important to give it a thorough look over. Okay, now if you have your AP set up and you have your liabilities and deductions attached to the AP vendors to which you would pay them, which apparently I don't have here, it would show all of those AP invoices right on this screen here. And when you go into accounts payable to do your next check run, you will also see those invoices in there. So it's a way of ensuring that you pay the liabilities that you're intending to pay each month. Now when I say finish pay run, what this does is makes the pay run permanent. Although you do have recourse even at this point. So if you've noticed, even after this point, that there was something wrong with the pay run, I'll show you what you can do. So I'm going to exit this screen, and I'm going to show you how this pay run affected the employees. If I go into the employee setup, I can double click on an individual worker, and under pay history, you're going to see that pay run. So even in pay history, you can get at the detail of that pay run. In other words, the hourly entries, which jobs did they affect, all that information that was entered originally in the time card entry. You can also preview the check here or even reprint it at this point in the pay history. So again, we like to make everything very visual for you. But as I mentioned, if you notice there was a problem with that pay run that we didn't catch, you can go up to Reports on the menu bar, Pay Run Reports, and because now it's a historical pay run, it shows up in this list of pay runs. And these are always in the order that you did them, the most recent being at the top of the screen. So if we needed to, we could restore any pay run actually, but let's restore the one we were just working on. And what that will do is take it out of the historical pay runs and put it back into our main payroll processing screen. So I'm going to click back into the pay run button, and you'll see there it is now, where we could reset it, although restoring it automatically resets it. Go into the time card entry, enter more hours, recalculate it, and finish the pay run. So this is why you want to use this as a test pay run initially to catch any payroll setup issues, and then you can have confidence then that the payroll is set up correctly as we move forward, and then start linking it with the worker IDs in the job cost area. This ends the lesson on doing a test pay run.